Have you ever felt like you're free, but not completely? Like the world tells you that you have a choice, a voice, a vote, yet deep down a quiet part of you whispers that something is off, that the freedom you think you have is thinner than paper. If you felt that, even for a second, this video is for you. Because what we call democracy today might be the most subtle kind of control humanity has ever created. A polite dictatorship we've mistaken for liberation. And the most disturbing part? You're participating in it every single day, often without realizing it. The lie we've been raised on. Since childhood, you've been told that democracy means freedom, that you can choose your leaders, that your voice shapes the world. But look around. Do you truly feel like you're shaping anything? Do you feel heard? Or do you feel like the world is being shaped around you, with or without your consent? Plato warned us about this almost 2,400 years ago. He argued that democracies inevitably decay into tyranny because people eventually become addicted to comfort, entertainment, and the illusion of choice. He said, when freedom becomes excessive, it turns into slavery. What did he mean? When a society becomes obsessed with freedom, it slowly forgets discipline, truth, responsibility. People begin to chase pleasure, distraction, and ego, and eventually become easy to manipulate. Sound familiar? The soft chains we wear. Unlike the dictators of the past, modern rulers don't need to use swords, prisons, or torture. They don't need to silence you. They just need to keep you scrolling. They don't need to control your body. They only need your attention. They don't need to ban your voice. They only need to drown it in a flood of meaningless noise. You don't silence a population by force. You silence it by exhaustion. Bonhoeffer once said that the downfall of society doesn't begin with wickedness, but with stupidity. A kind of intellectual laziness that makes people easy to shape and deceive. And that's what you're seeing today. Millions of people who feel informed but are actually numb, overstimulated, and distracted into submission. A polite dictatorship doesn't tell you what to think. It just overwhelms you until you stop thinking at all. The illusion of choice. You think you're choosing your leaders, but how many of your choices were created for you? The parties, the candidates, the headlines, the narratives, everything is pre-selected, pre-shaped, pre-filtered. You're offered a menu, not a choice. 2 or 3 options, all of which serve the same machine. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. He said that the best way to control people is to give them the feeling of freedom while quietly shaping the options they choose from. Not controlled by force, but by architecture. Not a tyrant on a throne, but a system that trains you to obey without realizing it.
Nietzsche believed that most people don't want freedom. They want comfort. They want security, not responsibility. Predictability, not truth. And when comfort becomes the highest god, people willingly trade their freedom for a stable cage. Just look at your own life. How often do you choose the easier path, the safer opinion, the socially approved belief, not because it's true, but because it makes life simpler? We've been trained to avoid friction, avoid thinking deeply, avoid questioning. And the more we avoid discomfort, the more control we surrender. A polite dictatorship doesn't need to break you. It simply invites you to break yourself. The story you weren't supposed to notice. Imagine a bird raised in a golden cage. Every day it is fed. Every day it is cared for. It never has to hunt, struggle, or fear. Eventually, the cage door opens, but the bird doesn't fly. Why? Because safety has replaced freedom. Comfort has replaced instinct. Certainty has replaced courage. That bird is us. Modern democracy opens the door and says, "Look, you are free." But the habits we've developed keep us perched exactly where the system wants us. We aren't chained by force. We're chained by preference. The uncomfortable truth you've been avoiding. Here's the twist. The problem isn't just the system. It's you. It's me. It's all of us. We've become passive participants in our own manipulation. We accept leaders we don't believe in. We repeat opinions we haven't examined. We scroll through problems we never confront. We watch the world change and whisper, "What can I do?" We mistake cynicism for intelligence. We mistake anxiety for awareness. We mistake noise for knowledge. And the system thrives on that confusion. A population that feels hopeless is easy to rule. A population that feels overwhelmed is easy to distract. A population that feels powerless is easy to pacify. This is the true genius of modern control. You don't need to imprison people who imprison themselves. So where does freedom begin? It begins the moment you stop outsourcing your mind. It begins when you notice the manipulation instead of drowning in it. When you ask questions you weren't supposed to ask. When you reject the narratives that are handed to you like pre-packaged meals. Plato believed that freedom begins with self-mastery, not the right to vote, not the right to speak, but the ability to govern yourself. And maybe that's the message we forgot. Real freedom doesn't come from the outside. It comes from within, from thinking deeply, from choosing consciously, from refusing to be lulled into comfort. The world doesn't need more voters. It needs more awake minds. A thought to leave you with. Every generation believes it is free. Every generation believes it sees clearly. Every generation believes it is too smart to be manipulated. And every generation is wrong. The question you need to ask yourself right now is simple. Are you living in a democracy, or are you living in a well-decorated cage? Look around, look within, and answer honestly, because your freedom depends on it. But here's the part nobody tells you. A cage doesn't need locks to hold you. It only needs to feel comfortable. And if that line made you uneasy, good. It means some part of you is waking up. Because the real danger isn't living under control. The real danger is living under control and calling it freedom. The awakening begins with one decision. Not a political decision, not a social one, a personal decision. A decision to reclaim the territory of your own mind, inch by inch, thought by thought, choice by choice. You can't control the world, but you can control the only battlefield that truly matters, your inner life.
And once you reclaim that, even partially, the entire game changes. You stop reacting. You start noticing. You stop absorbing. You start questioning. You stop being a pawn. You start becoming a player. This is why so many powerful thinkers, from Socrates to Kierkegaard, warned that inner freedom is dangerous. Not dangerous for you, but dangerous for the system. Because one free mind inspires another, and two free minds become contagious. And suddenly, the polite dictatorship starts to crack. Systems don't fear anger. They fear awareness. They don't fear rebellion. They fear clarity. They don't fear noise. They fear silence. The silence where your real thoughts can finally be heard. You were born for more than this. Maybe you felt it before. Some quiet voice that whispers, life wasn't supposed to feel like this. You scroll for hours. You argue online. You drown in other people's opinions. And yet, somehow, you feel emptier, not fuller. More confused, not wiser. It's because deep down, your mind knows the truth. You were not born to be a consumer. You were not born to be a spectator. You were not born to be an obedient participant in a system designed to keep you predictable. You were born to seek truth, to question, to think, to feel deeply, to live consciously. And maybe, just maybe, to challenge the world you inherited. The final realization. Here is the uncomfortable truth that ties it all together. The new dictators don't want obedience. They want your attention. If they can control what you look at, what you get angry about, what you laugh at, what you fear, they don't need your loyalty. They already have your mind. You don't defeat this system by overthrowing it. You defeat it by starving it. One moment of awareness at a time. Close the feed. Sit with your thoughts. Think a thought that wasn't given to you. Feel an emotion that wasn't marketed to you. Ask a question that isn't trending. That is rebellion now. That is power now. And so I leave you with this. In the end, democracy isn't a guarantee. It's a responsibility. One that we've allowed to weaken, soften, and collapse into gentle manipulation. But you, right here, right now, you can choose differently. You can decide to wake up, to think independently, to see clearly. And if you can do that, even a little, then you are already freer than most people will ever be. Because true freedom is not being allowed to choose. It's knowing why you choose. And the moment you understand that, really understand it, the polite dictatorship loses its power over you. Not because the world changed, but because you did. But before we end, there's one more truth you need to hear. A truth most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Freedom will cost you something. Not money, not status, not rebellion. It will cost you your illusions. You will lose the comforting belief that the world is fair. You will lose the fantasy that someone else will save you. You will lose the idea that progress is automatic, or the truth will simply reveal itself. And most painfully, you will lose the version of yourself who believed that obedience was safety. But what you gain in return is priceless. You gain self-respect. You gain clarity. You gain the rare ability to see the world as it is, not as it's advertised. That's why awakening is terrifying. It requires stepping out of the warm fog and into the stark, cold reality of your own consciousness. Most people never do it. They'd rather stay in the fog, arguing about shadows, distracted by illusions, fighting battles that don't matter.
But you wouldn't still be here if some part of you wasn't already pulling away from the fog. The world is built on sleepwalkers. Nietzsche said that the greatest danger is not evil rulers, but a society of people who refuse to think. Because sleepwalkers don't notice when their freedom dissolves. Sleepwalkers don't resist.
Sleepwalkers don't ask questions, but awaken one person, just one, and they can awaken another. And this is how every revolution in history has ever begun. Not with crowds, not with violence, but with a single awakened mind that refused to go back to sleep. That could be you. A final question, one you can't ignore. Before you return to your life, before the noise of the world floods back in, ask yourself something quietly, honestly, when no one else is listening. Are your thoughts truly your own, or were they given to you? Sit with that. Not for 5 seconds, but for as long as it takes for the truth to sting a little. Because that sting, that discomfort, that moment of inner resistance, that is your awakening beginning. Somewhere inside you, a door has opened, a door that can't be closed again. And once you walk through it, nothing about this world, not democracy, not power, not leadership, not freedom, will ever look the same again. You will see behind the curtain. You will recognize the game, and you will understand something most people never do. You were never powerless. You were only unaware. And awareness, real awareness, is the one thing no dictator, no system, no polite form of control can ever take from you. Carry that with you. Guard it. Grow it. Because the moment you choose to live awake, you silently break the greatest illusion of our time, that your mind ever belonged to anyone but you. It didn't. It doesn't. And now you finally know. And now that you know, there's one last thing you need to understand. Something simple, yet powerful enough to change the course of your entire life. Awakening is not a moment. It's a practice. You do not become free in a single realization. You become free in the quiet, daily decision to stay conscious in a world that profits from your unconsciousness. Every time you pause instead of react, you take your mind back. Every time you question instead of accept, you take your autonomy back. Every time you choose depth over distraction, you weaken the chains they can't see, but you can feel. Freedom is not an event. It's an ongoing rebellion against the part of you that wants to fall asleep again. And trust me, that part of you will fight. It will seduce you with ease. It will tempt you with comfort. It will whisper, "Why bother waking up? Life is simpler when you don't think so much." That voice is the last dictator you must overthrow. Because the external systems only control you as long as your internal system cooperates. And the moment you stop cooperating, the entire structure loses its leverage. The power you forgot you had. Here's the miracle that emerges once you step into awareness. You begin to shape yourself again. Not with society's expectations, not with political narratives, not with algorithms telling you what to want, but with truth, with intention, with clarity, with a sense of inner direction that no system can fabricate or manipulate. And when a single human being becomes self-directed, self-aware, and self-governing, they become something rare in this world. Untouchable. Not because they're strong, not because they're loud, but because they no longer derive their identity from the very machinery designed to control them. This is the foundation of real democracy, not the ballot, but the mind behind the ballot. A democracy of awakened individuals is unstoppable. A democracy of sleepwalkers is the easiest society to rule. Which one do you want to be part of? The line you will remember. So let me leave you with a final line, a quiet sentence that may echo in your mind long after this video ends. The world is not controlled by powerful people. It is controlled by people who believe they are powerless. If you reject that belief, if you let that sentence live inside you, if you let it guide the way you think, question, and act, then your life will no longer be shaped by the forces that control the many. It will be shaped by the person who awakened within you while you watch this video. A person who sees, a person who questions, a person who cannot be easily controlled, a person who is finally awake. And once you wake up, there's no going back. But awakening, real awakening, doesn't end with insight. It ends with choice. What will you do now, knowing what you know?
Will you slip back into the comfortable noise, telling yourself you'll think about this later? Will you let the world reclaim your attention, your focus, your inner clarity? Or will you take one small step, just one, toward becoming the kind of person who cannot be quietly shaped by systems that fear independent minds? Because everything changes when you make that choice consciously. Suddenly, you notice conversations differently. You see how people cling to opinions they never examined. You feel the weight of every headline designed to provoke, not inform. You recognize how much of the world runs on automatic thinking, how rare it is to meet someone who is truly present. And then it hits you. Awake people see a different world because they are no longer asleep in the old one. This is why philosophers were dangerous, not because they rebelled with violence, but because they rebelled with awareness. They were not easy to influence, not easy to manipulate, not easy to distract. And that is the one thing modern power structures cannot tolerate. A mind that thinks for itself in a world that prefers you don't think at all. The split path before you. Right now, whether you realize it or not, you're standing at a crossroads. One path leads back to the familiar, the predictable rhythm of distraction, the comforting lull of routine, the quiet surrender of your own curiosity. The other path leads forward, into uncertainty, into discomfort, into a deeper, more honest relationship with your own mind. One path gives you peace. The other gives you truth. And only one of them will make you free. The choice most people never make. Most people choose comfort, not because they're weak, but because they've been conditioned to believe that comfort equals safety. But here's the secret. Comfort is the oldest trap in the world. True safety has never come from staying asleep. It comes from learning how to see while everyone else has their eyes closed. So, ask yourself, quietly, honestly, courageously, are you ready to see? Not the curated version of reality, not the filtered world you're shown, but the raw, unedited truth that exists underneath all of it. If the answer is yes, even a hesitant yes, then you've already taken your first step out of the polite dictatorship and into your own sovereignty. Because waking up does not require permission. It only requires willingness. And you are willing. Otherwise, you wouldn't be still here. The final words, the ones you'll carry with you. So here is the last thing I want you to remember. Freedom is not given. Freedom is claimed.
And the moment a single human being claims the freedom of their own mind, the world around them loses its quiet hold. You don't escape modern tyranny by running from it. You escape it by becoming someone it can no longer control. Someone awake, someone aware, someone sovereign. Someone who understands that the most powerful revolution you will ever lead begins inside you. And maybe, just maybe, this moment was the beginning of yours. But before this ends, let me tell you one last story. A story philosophers have whispered for centuries, in different languages, in different eras, yet always meaning the same thing. It's the story of a person who lived inside a vast, comfortable kingdom, a place where everyone was fed, entertained and distracted, a place where choices were plentiful, but meaning was scarce, a place where people felt free, even as unseen forces quietly shaped their lives. One day, this person stepped outside the city gates, just for a moment, just to breathe, just to escape the noise. And in that silence, they noticed something they had never seen before. A thin line drawn across the horizon, barely visible, yet unmistakably real. A boundary. Not a wall, not a fence, but a boundary of the mind, marking the limits of everything the kingdom wanted them to think, believe, and become. They realized that their whole life had been lived within that invisible line. The world felt big, but it wasn't. The choices felt real, but they weren't. The freedom felt authentic, but it was curated, carefully calibrated so no one would ever question the kingdom itself. Most people never noticed that line. Most never will. But this person did. And once they saw it, even once, they could never unsee it again. They had two choices: step back inside the comfortable kingdom, or step beyond the line into a world they would have to navigate with nothing but their own awareness. The first path promised security. The second promised truth. They chose truth. And in that moment, that quiet, almost invisible moment, they discovered something profound. Freedom isn't a place. It's a direction. A direction you move toward every time you choose awareness over illusion, truth over comfort, consciousness over convenience. So what about you? You've seen the line now. You've felt it. Right there in the discomfort, in the questions that won't leave you alone, in the way this video made your mind stretch just a little further than usual. You can't pretend you don't see it anymore. You can't unknow what your mind has already registered.
You're standing where that person once stood, on the threshold between the world you were trained to accept and the world you're just beginning to perceive. So I'll ask you, gently but honestly, which direction will you choose? Because the truth is simple. Most people choose the kingdom. A rare few choose the horizon. And the difference between them is not intelligence, or strength, or destiny. The difference is courage. The courage to see. The courage to question. The courage to walk beyond the limits of a polite dictatorship that thrives on your silence. If you've listened this far, if something inside you is awake enough to even sense the horizon, then you already know your answer. And maybe, years from now, you'll look back at this moment and realize
This is where your real life began. Not in comfort, not in obedience, not in the illusion of freedom, but in the quiet decision to reclaim your mind and step into the unknown. Because the unknown is where free people are born. And if you really listen, if you sit with the silence right now, you might notice something subtle happening inside you. A shift, a tiny spark, a quiet awareness rising from a place you don't normally visit. That feeling isn't inspiration. It isn't motivation. It's recognition. Recognition of something ancient within you. The part of you that refuses to be domesticated. The part that remembers you were not born to be controlled, or softened, or molded into something predictable. You were born with a mind capable of piercing through illusions, a soul wired to seek meaning, and a heart brave enough to walk alone if necessary. Every system you live under, political, economic, social, was built around one fragile assumption, that you will never remember who you really are. Because once you remember, truly remember, the entire structure trembles. Not because you rise against it, but because you rise above it. Systems cannot control a person who understands themselves. Governments cannot pacify someone who is no longer numb. Society cannot manipulate someone who sees through the noise. And that is exactly what is happening inside you, right now. The moment you wake up, the world changes shape. From this point on, the world will feel a little different, not dramatically, but unmistakably. You'll start noticing how people repeat ideas that never belong to them. You'll see how outrage is manufactured, how distraction is weaponized, how comfort is used to keep people docile, consuming, unaware. You'll notice how rarely someone pauses long enough to ask, "Is this thought actually mine?"
And that question, that single question, is the crack in the wall that lets the light in. It's the beginning of your untamed mind breaking through. So here is your final invitation. Not a command, not a request. Just an invitation. One that only a few people in any generation ever accept.
And that tiny difference, that space between stimulus and response, is where your freedom lives. Every awakened person leaves a light behind. Whether you realize it or not, your awakening is not just about you. Every person who wakes up leaves a trail of subtle illumination for someone else to follow later. Your clarity becomes someone else's curiosity. Your honesty becomes someone else's courage. Your awareness becomes someone else's moment of recognition. This is how human beings quietly liberate each other. Not through speeches, not through revolutions, but through presence. Fully awake people create questions in the minds of those still sleeping. And one day, someone will look at you and feel something shift inside them, just like something shifted inside you today. So here is the final line, the true ending, the one that echoes long after the screen fades. If you remember nothing else, remember this. Awake is not a state. Awake is a direction.
A direction you commit to every time you choose clarity over comfort, truth over illusion, consciousness over convenience. Most people spend their lives walking in circles inside the boundaries placed around them. But you are no longer walking in circles. You are walking towards something. Something real. Something yours. Something free. And as long as you keep walking, even slowly, even imperfectly, you will never again live as the person you were trained to be. You will live as the person you were meant to become. And that is the quiet beginning of an extraordinary life. And finally, take a deep breath. Let the weight of all this sink in. Because here is the ultimate truth. The world will never hand you freedom. It will never gift you clarity. It will never announce that you are awake. Freedom is not an external condition. It is a choice, a daily practice, a quiet defiance against the invisible forces that whisper you into sleep. And it starts now, right here, right inside your own mind. No one can give you this. No system can take it away. No election, no headline, no distraction. Nothing in the world has the power to reclaim it once you claim it yourself. The last question. Ask yourself, quietly,